You're welcome back to Secure the Continent and News Central Television. We're discussing the 6-month anniversary since the war broke out between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese Armed Forces in Sudan. Now, joining me for this conversation is Sani, Aliyu, a freelance journalist, joins us live from Abeche City in Chad. Now, warm welcome to you, Mr. Aliyu, and thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let's track back a bit and look at how the events played out in April this year. Can you elaborate on the specific triggers and underlying causes that led to the escalation of hostilities between the Sudanese armed forces led by General al-Burhan and the Rapid Support Forces led by Abeche, ultimately resulting in a civil war?
Sure. Early this year, as you rightly said, there was a long brewing conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and the head of the Rapid Support Forces, who was the man in charge of security for the ousted Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir. Well, initially they had an agreement that they would share power after the ouster of al-Bashir. And Mr. Hamdan Daglo Hamiti, who is the head of the RSF, was given the position of the vice president of the new government, the military government that took over after al-Bashir. Unfortunately, they fell out soon after because he refused, that is, Hamiti, the head of the RSF, refused to honor an agreement that said his fighters should be assimilated into the Sudanese armed forces. And that led to a lot of back and forth. And finally, war broke out when the Sudanese army got fed up and attacked one of the bases of the RSF inside Khartoum. The RSF fighters now retaliated, and since then, there has been an ongoing civil war. Much of Khartoum and the neighboring city of Omdurman are no-go areas, and large parts of Darfur in the southwestern part of Sudan are also a serious conflict zone now. So since then, several ceasefires have been, put in place, but nobody has been honoring any of the ceasefires. This is the situation right now.
Okay, and still talking about the situation right now, Sani Aliyu. Where does the fighting stand as at now? The talks of the RSF having an upper hand in Khartoum, and it's been 6 months. There are reports that over 6,000 people have died. Has either side gained a upper hand militarily as we speak right now?
Thank you. Like the talks in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, the Americans and the Saudis have been leading the effort to bring a lasting ceasefire. But unfortunately, these two parties are supporting, one or the other of the parties in the conflict. Like the Saudis are supporting the RSF, it's clear. A lot of RSF fighters are fighting on the side of the Saudi military against the Houthi army in Yemen. And the Americans are supporting the government of Sudan. So even though they are playing the role of mediators, nothing concrete has been done, because I have just left Darfur, the city of Niala, recently, and I'm sure to tell you this, there is no sign of the ceasefire in place all this month, no government presence. The RSF fighters are all over the place. So in the Darfur area, the RSF fighters are in charge. Half of Khartoum, at least half of Khartoum is under the control of the RSF. And that has forced the military government to leave the city in its entirety and move to Port Sudan on the Red Sea coast. There are no Sudanese armed forces, men or women in Khartoum right now. So effectively, it's under the control of the RSF. So, nationwide, you could say maybe there is a balance in the control of the 50% of the country. The eastern part of Sudan is under the government. The western part of Sudan is under the RSF. It's a stalemate. the other topic you brought about the situation right now, actually, people are actually suffering. Apart from the 6,000 deaths, there are 100 to 200,000 people who have been displaced inside Sudan. They have moved to cities or towns or villages, but 2.something million of them are across the border in a place I am right now called Adre in Chad, just across the border from Sudan. More than 2 million Sudanese. The Chadians are taking most of the bulk of for taking care of the refugees that are here. So it's a mess.
Now, Mo, a lot of observers are wondering why this conflict has lasted for 6 months because of the innocents caught in the crossfire. This is the belligerents don't really care about ordinary Sudanese. It's a personal fight for power between these two belligerents, General Abdel Fattah and Mohammed Hamdan Daglo. Now, you mentioned ceasefires in your opening statement, that efforts to reach a ceasefire has failed. Multiple efforts. 10 ceasefires have not managed to even hold before the ink which they were written on dries up. So are there any latest efforts regarding efforts to broker peace?
The latest efforts I have noted are actually from the Egyptians and the Ethiopians. They have a very big stake in this because across the border, to the northern border of Sudan, is Egypt, and to the east, southeastern part of Sudan, they have over 1,000 kilometers. It's Ethiopia and Eritrea. And these two countries are also facing their own internal conflict, so to speak. So they have been very, very careful, and they are worried about this thing spilling over into their territory. So they are the only two countries that I can see that are making some effort. Apart from the Chadians that have been taking in hundreds and thousands of refugees, it is the Ethiopians and the Egyptians that have been very active in trying to bring this conflict to an end. Unfortunately, the two sides to the conflict seem to ignore all the entreaties from all sides of the divide, from the African Union to the regional blocs, the Arab League, and with the United Nations too, urging them. There are no aid agencies in Darfur. They can't get in because a lot of groups, criminal gangs, have taken over the highways. So they stop every vehicle and ransack it and take whatever they like. So people are left to their own devices. It's a very serious situation. People have no medicine and no food.
A serious and dire situation indeed. Now, Mo, in your analysis, why do you think the international community's efforts to mediate peace in Sudan have been fragmented and ineffective, and how can this situation be improved?
Well, the United Nations actually is being blamed actually for not acting fast enough. When the crisis started, it was merely an issue between, it was power play between Al-Burhan and Hamiti. And if they had stepped in early, the civil war would have been averted. There is an ongoing agreement for the military to hand over to the civilians, that is to a democratically elected government, after 30 months. The time is up. But nobody is even talking about it. The military is playing a very dangerous game in this sense because they do not want the crisis to end, because they will now have to start looking at honoring the agreements that have been signed by all the parties to the conflict, by the United Nations, by the African Union, by the former Prime Minister of Sudan, Abdullah Hamdouk. There are so many things that have already been agreed upon, but nobody seems to want to go to the status quo. So that is the situation right now. The Sudanese military is as much to blame as anybody. You can say that the RSF, they're actually a band of fighters. They are, they got morphed into the RSF from the Janjaweed militia fighters. So they are not supposed to be, the kind of group that you will place a lot of emphasis on when it comes to that humanity, human life, and whatever. They are fighters. Most of them are uneducated. They have spent decades in the bush. But the government of Sudan, the military government, at least it's an organized military force. They should have done better. But they are playing a dangerous game. They want to remain in power after the ouster of Al-Bashir. And so they stifle every effort to get everything back on course. And this is one of the issues. So the United Nations didn't act fast enough. The AU has been playing a very lame game. And so everybody is passing the blame. Nobody seems to be serious about it. And people are suffering. So the only way to get this thing corrected, the situation in Sudan corrected, is for the United Nations, the African Union, and the countries around Sudan to bring these two warring parts of the conflict to sit down and actually agree. They can force them to do it. The Americans can force the Sudanese government to do something, and the Southeast can actually force the RS fighters to stop fighting, because they are their masters. I'm telling you this.
Now, Mo, beyond the protracted and failed multiple ceasefires, what else can the international community do? And how have there's something called, some have suggested that maybe they're going through a sort of conflict fatigue, the situation in Ukraine and then now the Gaza-Israel situation. How has the international community responded to the crisis in Sudan, both in terms of humanitarian aid and diplomatic initiatives? And what is the effectiveness of the responses so far?
Okay, if you remember, I told you earlier that aid agencies that have tried to take aid, medicines, and food especially into Darfur, which is the most devastated area apart from Khartoum, have all left. There is no presence. All aid agencies can't get in because, as I said, militias, criminal gangs have taken over the major highways into all the cities in the area. And so getting in or out of Darfur specifically is almost impossible. I had to leave the place because internet connection, they had destroyed all the maps, so there was no way you can communicate with the outside world. And so this has made reporting the hardship in South Sudan a lot more difficult for the aid agencies and for journalists. The United Nations and all the aid agencies have tried to send aid and medicine, but as I said, it's very, very difficult to do so right now. And seeing that the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, mind you, and the other conflict in Europe, that is the Ukrainian conflict, have also been taking the shine, so to speak, of the Sudanese conflict. It has reached a stage where fatigue is starting to set in and people are looking elsewhere. And that means the Sudanese people are left to their own devices to find a way to solve this problem by themselves. Nobody seems to be able to find a solution as of now. It's very difficult to predict the clear path to ending this conflict right now.
Now, Mos, you're talking about the humanitarian situation. How has the anarchy and power struggle between the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces exacerbated the humanitarian crisis? Could you provide specific examples of its impact on the ground, how it's affecting ordinary Sudanese people, and how much of a disruption it is to the life they knew before this conflict broke out?
Right. Number one, there are no hospitals, no functional hospitals anywhere in Khartoum and in most of Darfur, where the conflict is raging. No government presence, no government employees, no policemen, no soldiers, no armed forces personnel anywhere in that region. So nobody to distribute aid, nobody to ensure that things are done, even if it is not, but in an equitable manner, nobody to watch out for the average Sudanese citizen. So when you get injured, or you need medicines, or you need food, you are left devices. Now, in Niala, which is the capital city of South Darfur State, the two major markets have been razed to the ground, and people have looted every other shop that has not been razed. No food is left in the city. That has made more than 50% of the population to move out into the countryside to live with relatives in the villages where at least they can go to the farms and eke out a living. So people die of hunger and starvation and lack of medicines. Basic medicines like painkillers are not available in Sudan right now. This is the situation.
A very terrible situation, if I may add, and hope is that the international community would be able to respond with some sort of urgency, and also the African Union. Now, before we go on a break, Mo, just wanted to touch base with you on the areas, looking at the geography of Sudan, where that have seen most of this fighting occur. Beyond Khartoum, Omdurman and Darfur, as the conflict spread to other areas, what's the situation in Port Sudan, and is there danger of it spreading beyond the cities I just mentioned?
Yes, there is. As I said earlier, the western part of Sudan, the entire western part of Sudan, that is from the northwest down to the southwestern part of Sudan, is called Darfur. There are actually 5 states that comprise of Darfur. All the 5 states of Darfur are facing this conflict right now. Now, central Sudan is where Khartoum is, and the twin city of Omdurman. Now, to the south, you have the Gbenga state, you have the White Nile state, which hitherto had been, crisis-free. But in the last 1 month, the RSF fighters have moved into that area and have pushed the Sudanese military out, effectively stripping the central part of Sudan of any Sudanese army presence. So the Sudanese military are actually restricted to the eastern part of Sudan. There are about 5 states there, Gadaris, Kassala, there's the Blue Nile state, and Sinnar. These states are crisis-free for now. They are under the control of the Sudanese army. And that is where Port Sudan is. The Port Sudan is by the Red Sea state, where the government of Sudan has effectively moved. All the ministers are there now. That is from where they are running the government, or what is left of the government. So central Sudan and the entire western part of Sudan are under the control of the RSF. So you could say that most of Sudan is under their control right now. The danger now is when the RSF fighters find out that the Sudanese army can't take over some of the areas that they have taken over from them, that is in the central part of Sudan. This will embolden them to move eastward, effectively taking over cities or states like, as I mentioned, like Gadari, like the Blue Nile state, and Kassala. If they do that, they will be a few hundred kilometers to the Red Sea, and that will be the end of the fight as far as I'm concerned. If the Sudanese army cannot take over the central part of the country, which is the most important part, consisting of Madani in Jazeera state, it's game over.
Thank you very much, Mo. A fine place to go on a break. When we return, we'll look at possible solutions to addressing this crisis in Sudan. Thank you for staying with us. If you're just joining, this is Secure the Continent, and we've been looking at the security situation in Sudan after 6 months of the crisis. We have with us Sani, Aliyu, a freelance journalist who joins us live from Abeche city in Chad. Thanks for staying with us, Mo. Still looking at this situation, let's talk about Darfur and why Darfur is important in this conflict, because beyond Khartoum, we've seen that, like you said, a lot of this fighting is taking place in Darfur. What's the extent of the destruction of villages in Darfur, and why is Darfur important to this conflict? Why is it seeing a lot of violence, and how has this, its history, contributed to the overall destabilization and displacement within the region?
Okay, Darfur is, as I said, the entire western part of Sudan. There are several African tribes that inhabit that area. The largest of them are the Masalit. They have always had a fight for control of the area, again, with the Arabs. The Arab tribes had always wanted to control Darfur for one simple reason. It is the area with the largest deposits, mineral deposits. There are tons of gold in Darfur. Its fertile land is able to produce a lot of foodstuff. Most of the food that is produced in Sudan comes from that area, and it is the gateway to the western part of Africa through Chad to West Africa. So it's a very important part of Sudan. That is one. So because of the mineral resources, especially gold and the agricultural produce that is produced there are many tribes and many groups had wanted to control Darfur, and the people there had always fought back. So that was the reason why the former Sudanese military president Omar al-Bashir, he formed the Janjaweed militia and put General Hamdan Daglo, who is the head of the RSF now, he put him in charge of the Janjaweed militia and reportedly tasked him with quelling any opposition to his government. So over the years, the Janjaweed militia have been suppressing and killing people who had opposed the government of Omar al-Bashir. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, everything turned around to bite Mr. al-Bashir, because the same guy, that is General Hamdan Daglo, he pitched his tent with the military and ousted him. And he's now joining the military. Mr. al-Bashir is in prison, while his benefactor, Hamdan Daglo, is at war with the Sudanese military. That is the genesis of the crisis in Darfur right now. So why the fighting is even more intense there is because that is the area that the RSF fighters have full control of in Sudan. Historically, they had always had control over Darfur. They were not strong in the central part of Sudan, and they were also strong in the eastern part of Sudan.
Okay.
So when the military found out that, okay, this is where these fighters are, they went after them. Unfortunately, there are more fighters. The RSF has more fighters than the Sudanese army has soldiers. And they are well armed. They've got a lot of money. The gold that has been mined in Darfur, most of the gold is controlled by RSF. So they have a ton of cash. They have a lot of weapons, and they have hundreds of thousands of fighters.
Thank you very much, Mo. Now, earlier you did talk about some of the challenges faced by humanitarian organizations in delivering aid across Sudan. You said some of these highways have been overtaken and overrun by bandits, and some of these aid agencies will not want to risk the lives of their personnel. But aid is critical, and it does need to get to those who need it, the most vulnerable in the Sudanese society. Now, as far as the humanitarian situation grows dire, Mo, in your opinion, what assistance is much needed for Sudanese civilians caught up in the crossfire, and how can they appeal to both sides to, at least establish a humanitarian corridor so that much needed aid can get to those who need it?
Okay, in any conflict, I think the most important thing that is needed basically is food and medicines. The Sudanese civilians caught in the crossfire have one thing in common. They're all hungry, and most of them are really ill. They need a lot of medicines, and they need a lot of food, which is not coming through. And the little food or medicines that get through have been hijacked by criminal gangs and who keep, selling them at exorbitant rates. Now, it's all petrol is one of the items that is really needed for aid to get from one end to the other. Because of the fighting, it has become very difficult. A liter of petrol a liter of petrol in Sudan sells for about 1,200 Sudanese pounds, which is about 1,500 Nigerian naira. So transportation is very difficult to get, moving from one state to another, moving goods, moving services, personnel from one end of Sudan to another, especially in the crisis area, is really, really very expensive. So the only thing that can be done, as I said, is for the two powers that have influence here. I'm talking about the Americans and the Saudis. If they can put some pressure on the Sudanese government and the RSF, there will be some ceasefire. So aid can get in, and the easiest route to get aid into Sudan right now is from Chad. That is from the eastern part of Chad into Sudan, into Darfur directly. You can get trucks that have been lined at the border. You see more than 100 trucks with food and medicines. They've been here for more than a month. They can't get in. So somebody has to wield their influence here. And I think it's the Americans and the Saudis.
Now, finally, Mo, to the million-dollar question, do you see an end to this conflict in the next few months? As the 6-month line is quite a milestone, and it doesn't seem there's any end in sight. What will it also take to bring an end to this conflict in Sudan?
Well, right now everything looks very bleak. Even from an outsider like me, I know Sudan. I've been in Sudan since 2014, in and out. But I can tell you that Sudanese are very optimistic people. But in the last 1 or 2 months, they have become despondent, and many of them are leaving for, as I said, neighboring countries, example Chad or South Sudan, which is also facing its own conflict. But right now, it looks like a good deal to move into South Sudan from Sudan. And so in the next 6 months, there is a chance. What I'm hearing is that certain groups inside Sudan have started striking deals, and they are now forcing some change in the attitude of the military and the RSF fighters. Sudan is a very big country, twice the size of Nigeria at least, but they have got tribal affiliations, very strong tribal affiliations, even in the military. So what is happening right now is that some of the large tribes, like the Masalit, like the Arab tribes in the east, have started putting pressure on their sons and daughters that are in the military and in the RSF, and this is forcing them to start acting differently, and this is causing, hopefully, in the next 2-3 months, we will see a reduction in the fighting and possibly some ceasefire that will hold this time. If that is successful, then we're on the road to recovery. But Sudan will take 20 years, 30 years maybe, to rebuild some of the infrastructure. Khartoum, half of Khartoum is in rubble right now.
Quite a sad situation and very avoidable, but I do share your optimism, and for the sake of the innocent and the good people of Sudan, we hope this conflict reaches an end very soon. Thank you very much, Mo Sani Aliyu, freelance journalist, joined from Abeche City in Chad. We do appreciate your contribution to the program. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.